ruin it all! From today on, this house will have no trace of you left!
Margaret threw the old cloth bag hard into the middle of the fire, then stood up straight, still keeping a cold smile on her lips, as if she had just done something entirely righteous. Grace stood frozen at the doorway, her eyes wide as she watched the flames swallow each familiar item of hers.
Mother, please don't burn that bag!
Her voice trembled, but that plea only made Margaret look down on her even more.
So now you're still attached to this pile of worthless rags?
She laughed, turning to look at the people standing in the yard as if she wanted to prove that she was the true owner of the house. Michael stood not far away, his hand clenched tightly, but his feet still did not move forward. Grace looked at him, her eyes as if begging for help one last time. "Michael, please say something." But he only lowered his head, his voice so small it almost dissolved into the sound of the burning fire. "Grace, don't make everything bigger anymore." Just that one sentence alone was enough to make Grace's heart turn cold. In that moment, she understood that what was being burned was not only her clothes, it was also the last bit of hope that this husband would stand on her side when she needed him most. Margaret saw Grace silent and became even more triumphant. "You entered this house with empty hands, so you should leave here the same way." The flames rose higher, the bright red light casting onto each person's face in the yard, but no one knew that inside that old cloth bag there were not only a few faded outfits. It also contained the things Grace had protected like her own life, things that money could not buy back and apologies could not restore. There are losses that happen very quietly, but their consequences last for many years. There are people who think they are only punishing someone weak, but in truth they are lighting with their own hands the last road that could save themselves later. Grace's story began like that, not with a big argument, nor with a noisy betrayal, but with a fire in the yard and the silence of the people who should have protected her. Grace was originally a gentle, hard-working woman who always believed that family was the place where people could endure more in order to love each other more. From the day she stepped into Michael's house, she had never demanded anything for herself. She woke up early to cook, clean, take care of every person in the house, listen to criticism, then quietly swallowed her tears inside. Every time Margaret said, "What does a poor thing like you know about this family's honor?" Grace only lowered her head. Every time she mocked, "My son marrying you was the biggest mistake of his life," Grace still tried to smile, and every time she looked toward Michael, hoping he would say one sentence to defend her, he only sighed and said, "Mother is old, just endure a little." Grace had endured for a very long time. So long that in Margaret's eyes, her silence was no longer endurance but became something for her to step on however she wanted. But a person can endure poverty, endure contempt, even endure coldness. Only one thing is very hard to endure, and that is watching the last precious thing of theirs be treated by others like trash. And as that cloth bag slowly burned in the yard, Grace still did not know that from this moment her life would turn in another direction, and the people standing there, silent or laughing at her, would one day have to remember this fire with a fear that could not be named. Grace entered Michael's house with a small suitcase and a very great belief that as long as she lived well enough, her husband's family would eventually accept her. She was born in a poor neighborhood, her father died early, and her mother also left her before she could even have a real support. Therefore, from childhood Grace had been used to doing everything herself, enduring every bitter word herself, and reminding herself that she must not become a burden to anyone. When she married Michael, she thought that at last she had a family. But to Margaret, Michael's mother, Grace had never been a daughter-in-law. In her eyes, she was only a poor girl lucky enough to step into this house. "What does your family have to bring to my son?" Margaret once asked right at the first meal with relatives present. Grace lowered her head, her hand gently clenched under the table, while Michael only lightly placed his hand on her shoulder and said softly, "Don't take it to heart, she only says that." But Margaret did not only say that once. Every time guests came to the house, she found a way to mention Grace's background like a joke. "This girl is hard-working, but if you say she is worthy of Michael, she is still far from it." Everyone laughed awkwardly. No one defended Grace. No one said those words had gone too far. Little by little, the silence of the entire house became something that allowed Margaret to hurt her even more. She made Grace get up before dawn to mop the floors, cook, wash clothes, and still complained that she had not cleaned well enough. The clothes Grace had bought with her own savings were pulled out of the closet and thrown into the yard simply because Margaret believed they embarrassed the family. "You actually dare to hang this pile of trash in my house?" Grace quietly picked up each piece of clothing, dusted it off, and took it to wash again. The neighbors saw it, the relatives knew about it too, but everyone chose to look away, because the pain of a poor woman was often treated as something insignificant in a wealthy family. The only thing Grace always kept carefully was an old cloth bag hidden deep in the corner of the closet. Every time Margaret threw her belongings into the yard, Grace always ran to check that bag first. Michael once asked what was inside, and Grace only gave a sad smile and said, "It's the last thing I have left." He heard her but asked nothing more. And Margaret had no idea that the old worn-out bag she always looked down on contained the one thing that could change the fate of all of them someday. Grace never thought the day would come when her quiet efforts would be rewarded. After many years of working part-time while continuing her studies every evening, she finally received a job offer from a company she had always dreamed of. It was not just a new job, but also the first opportunity that would allow her to stand firmly on her own feet. Holding the offer letter in her hands, Grace smiled for a long time before deciding to tell the family, because she still naively believed they would be happy for her. "Mother, I got the job. Next week I'll move to a place closer to the company, so it'll be easier to get to work." The room suddenly fell silent for a few seconds. Margaret set her teacup down hard on the table, her eyes instantly turning cold. "You said you're moving out? Or are you planning to leave this house?" Grace quickly shook her head and explained, "I just wanted to be more convenient to get to work. I'll still come back on weekends." But the more she explained, the more Margaret believed Grace was looking for a way to leave the family now that she had a chance to change her life. She walked straight into Grace's room, flung open the closet, and began throwing every set of clothes into the yard. "If you're so determined to leave, then what are you taking with you? All of this is useless." Grace ran after her in panic, picking up her belongings as tears choked her voice. "Mother, please, stop, please." Her pleading did not make Margaret hesitate. She continued dragging out the suitcase, the blankets, and everything else, piling them into a heap in the middle of the yard. Michael stood on the porch, his face filled with confusion. Grace turned toward her husband with eyes pleading for help. "Michael, talk to Mother, please." He only sighed softly and said, "Calm down. Mother is angry." That one sentence was enough for Grace to understand that today she would have to face everything alone. Margaret picked up a can of fuel, poured it over the pile of clothes, and coldly set it on fire. The flames burst up violently as Grace cried in despair. Ignoring the heat, she rushed toward the fire, but the neighbors held her back, afraid she would be burned. Within just a few minutes, everything had turned into black ashes. When the fire had completely died out, Grace collapsed to her knees on the ground, her trembling hands digging through the hot ashes. Then she froze when she saw the half-burned pieces of paper and the warped metal clasp from the old cloth bag. Inside it had been all of her birth certificate, original documents, the certificates she had carefully kept for many years, and the last letters her mother had left behind before she passed away. Now they were nothing more than fragile ashes that fell apart the moment she touched them. Grace held the ashes in her arms, tears falling without a sound. Margaret only glanced at her and said coldly, "Why cry over a pile of old things? If they're gone, just buy new ones." Grace slowly stood up. She did not argue, nor did she blame anyone. She pulled the empty suitcase that was all she had left and slowly walked out through the gate she had once considered home. Before reaching the exit, she stopped, turned back to look at everyone standing behind her, and calmly said, "One day, you'll understand what you've burned." No one stopped her, and no one knew that those words would become a warning of the years of regret this entire family would carry with them for many years afterward. As the gate closed behind Grace, she realized she no longer had any place to return to. Inside the old suitcase were only a few sets of clothes that had not been taken away, a small amount of savings, and the wrinkled job offer letter soaked with her tears. During her first days in the unfamiliar city, Grace rented a tiny room barely large enough for a single bed and an old wooden table. During the day, she worked as a warehouse employee. In the evenings, she took on office cleaning jobs, and on weekends, she waited tables at a restaurant to earn enough money to get by. Some days, she came home just before dawn, both hands covered with blisters from carrying heavy loads. She would quietly sit by the window, looking at the streetlights, and whisper to herself, "I may lose everything, but I cannot lose myself." Grace never told anyone about what had happened in her former home, nor did she ever blame fate. The only thing she did every day was keep moving forward. Yet life still seemed unwilling to let her go. One afternoon, while delivering goods to a customer, Grace unexpectedly ran into several of Michael's relatives. They looked at her faded uniform and sneered. "So you left home to change your life, and in the end you're still just working for someone else?" Another mocked. "If you had listened to your mother-in-law back then, you wouldn't have ended up like this." Grace simply lowered her head, smiled faintly, and quietly walked away. She did not explain, because she understood that there are people who never truly want to know the truth. It was during those hardest days that Grace met Evelyn, an older woman who ran a traditional handicraft workshop. Evelyn noticed the young woman who always arrived earlier than everyone else, worked carefully, and never complained even when given the heaviest tasks. One day, after seeing Grace improve the packaging process in a way that saved both time and materials, Evelyn called her into her office. "Who taught you to do that?" Grace gently shook her head. "No one. I just thought it would be better this way." Evelyn remained silent for a long time before smiling. "What I need isn't someone who knows how to work, but someone who knows how to think." From that day on, she began teaching Grace little by little about management, business, and how to build a brand. She did not give her money, nor did she promise her an easy path, but she gave her something more valuable, the belief that true ability would eventually be recognized. Many years passed. Grace went from being an ordinary employee to managing the workshop, then worked with Evelyn to expand the business into many other fields. Grace's name gradually became known to many people because of her integrity and the sincere way she treated her employees. After Evelyn retired, she handed over full control of the business to Grace. On the day they signed the transfer documents, Evelyn held Grace's hand tightly and said, "You didn't succeed because you were lucky. You succeeded because you never allowed your pain to turn you into a bitter person." Grace burst into tears, because it was the first time in many years that someone had truly seen everything she had silently endured. From a woman who had walked out of her husband's house with nothing, Grace gradually became the owner of a company respected by many. She built her business with the kindness she had once longed to receive, treating her employees with the respect she herself had never been given. Meanwhile, back at the old house, everything quietly fell apart. Michael's business suffered one loss after another because of poor decisions. Customers gradually left, debts piled up, and the house that had once been lively was now filled with nothing but arguments. Margaret was no longer as healthy as before. The months of constant worry sent her to the hospital again and again, but what broke her down the most was the growing feeling of unease. Every time Michael looked at his mother, he remembered that afternoon when the flames had risen in the yard years before. He no longer blamed circumstances or his mother's anger, because he knew the one person who could have stopped it was himself. But he had chosen to remain silent. Some nights he sat alone for a very long time, whispering hopelessly, "If only I had stepped forward that day." But time never comes back. The greatest turning point came when the family reviewed all of their records in an attempt to save the company from bankruptcy. After checking everything several times, an elderly lawyer fell silent before asking about the original documents that had once been in Grace's name. After hearing Michael explain that they had been burned many years earlier, the lawyer could only sigh. They weren't just ordinary documents. They were the only proof connected to a portion of an inheritance and ownership rights worth an enormous amount, enough to help the company survive this crisis if they still existed. The room fell silent. Margaret collapsed into her chair, both hands trembling. For the first time in her life, she realized that the fire she had started years ago to satisfy her anger had not only reduced Grace's past to ashes, but had also burned away her own family's last chance to save themselves. 6 years passed. Time had taken away many things, but it had also returned to Grace, the things she had once believed she would never have again. The small town that had watched her quietly walk out of her husband's gate with an old suitcase now spoke her name with respect. People no longer called Grace the poor daughter-in-law who had been looked down on by her mother-in-law. They called her the woman who had built an entire career with her own 2 hands. The house where Grace lived stood on a quiet street. It did not flaunt wealth, yet every corner radiated peace. In the mornings, birds sang in the small garden. In the afternoons, employees and business partners often stopped by to discuss work. Everyone who entered bowed their heads and greeted her with genuine respect. Grace had never used success to prove she was better than anyone else. She simply lived according to the things she herself had once longed to receive: respect, kindness, and fairness. Perhaps that was why more and more people chose to stay by her side. But there are debts from the past that, whether you want them to or not, eventually find their way back. That day, a light rain was falling. Grace had just finished a meeting when the housekeeper walked in and said cautiously, "Miss Grace, there are 2 visitors who said they won't leave until they've seen you." Grace closed the file, calmly stood up, and for some reason, a strangely familiar feeling suddenly rose within her. When the living room door opened, every memory she had thought was long asleep quietly returned. Sitting in the chair opposite her were Margaret and Michael. But they no longer looked like the people they had been 6 years earlier. Margaret had aged considerably. Her hair had turned almost completely gray. Deep wrinkles lined her face, and the arrogance she had once carried seemed to have been worn away completely by years of illness and failure. Michael had changed as well. The suit he wore was old, his eyes were sunken from sleepless nights, and the confidence of the man who had once believed he would never fail was gone. The room fell silent. No one knew where to begin. The person who had once spoken the loudest was now the one who lacked the courage to say a single word. At last, Margaret slowly stood up. She looked at Grace for a long time, then unexpectedly lowered her head. Her trembling lips struggled before finally managing to speak. "Grace, I know I no longer deserve to call you my daughter-in-law, but today, please let me say everything I need to say." Grace did not answer. She simply gestured gently for them to sit down before quietly taking the seat opposite them. Her face was so calm that no one could tell what she was thinking. It was that very calmness that made Margaret choke up even more. Tears streamed down her face as she could no longer hold on to the last of her pride. "I was wrong. Wrong from the very first day you walked into that house. I always thought that as long as our family had money, we had the right to look down on others. I thought you were weak, so you would endure it forever. Only after losing everything did I realize that the most precious person was the very one I had cruelly hurt." Michael kept his head lowered. His hands were clenched so tightly that they had turned pale. After a long time, he finally dared to look at Grace. There was no longer any avoidance in his eyes, only regret. "I'm sorry. Not a single day has passed in these 6 years that I haven't thought about that afternoon. What torments me isn't that the company went bankrupt or that the family lost everything. It's the moment you turned to me and begged me to say one word, just one word, and I chose to remain silent. I always told myself I was keeping peace in the family, but now I finally understand. My silence was the cruelest thing of all." Grace quietly listened to every word. She did not interrupt. She did not argue, nor did she reveal the slightest emotion. Michael took a deep breath before continuing. The lawyer investigated all the records again. The documents that were burned that year were the only proof connected to the assets that could have saved the company. If they had still existed, everything would have been different. Mother and I destroyed our own family's last chance with our own hands. As soon as he finished speaking, Margaret suddenly dropped to her knees in front of Grace. The woman who had once forced Grace to bow and apologize was now the one bowing before her. I beg you, please save this family. I don't dare ask for your forgiveness. I only ask that you give us one chance to make things right. Michael slowly knelt beside his mother. His eyes were red with tears. Grace, I know I no longer have the right to ask for your help, but if there's even a little compassion left in your heart, I'm begging you. The room seemed to stand still. Grace looked at the two people before her for a long time. In that moment, the memories of 6 years ago returned as vividly as if they had happened only yesterday. The same yard, the same blazing fire, the same choking pleas, the same way Michael had looked away, and the same cold expression on Margaret's face as she watched everything turn to ashes. Grace slowly turned her head toward the garden outside the window. The rain had stopped without her noticing. Sunlight filtered through the trees, covering the grass with a soft golden glow. She took a deep breath before turning back. Her voice remained as calm as the surface of a still lake. I only want to ask you one question. Margaret and Michael looked up at the same time. Grace looked directly at them before slowly saying each word. If that day, the one standing in the yard crying, had not been me but the two of you, if your family's last keepsakes had been burned to ashes, if you had been the ones begging while I simply stood there watching, then today, would you be able to forgive me? The entire room sank into a heavy silence. Margaret burst into tears but could not answer. Michael slowly closed his eyes as tears quietly rolled down his face. They understood that there are wounds in this world that no longer bleed, yet still hurt for an entire lifetime. And for the first time in 6 years, they truly felt the helplessness Grace had carried on that fateful afternoon. Grace continued looking at Margaret and Michael for a long time. There was no longer any resentment in her eyes, nor was there the sense of triumph the two of them had once imagined they would see if they ever had to bow before her. After everything that had happened, Grace's heart no longer carried the fire of hatred. All that remained was the peace she had earned through countless tears. She gently stood up, poured 3 cups of tea, and placed them in front of the two of them. That simple gesture made Margaret lower her head even further, because she understood that Grace's kindness today only made the cruelty she had once shown her all those years ago stand out even more. Grace smiled faintly, her voice slow but firm. I'm offering you both a cup of tea, because you are my guests, but as for what you're asking of me, I'm afraid I cannot help. The entire room fell silent. Margaret looked up at Grace with tear-filled eyes. You still can't forgive me, can you? Grace gently shook her head. No, I forgave you a long time ago. That answer left both Margaret and Michael stunned. Michael asked in a trembling voice, If you've already forgiven us, why are you still refusing? Grace looked directly at him, her eyes as calm as if she were stating a very simple truth. Forgiveness is so that my own heart can find peace. Whether I choose to help or not, that's a different choice. There are losses that money can never make up for. There are things that, once they're gone, can never be recovered for the rest of your life. She paused for a few seconds before continuing. The day that bag burned to ashes, it wasn't only the documents that disappeared. The last letters my mother left behind also disappeared. The last words from my mother that I could still read also disappeared. No one in this world can rewrite those letters for me. No one can give me back my memories, and no one can turn back time to change what happened that afternoon. Margaret covered her face and burst into tears. For the first time in her life, she truly understood that what she had once mocked as a pile of old things had actually been an entire part of someone else's life. She choked out, I didn't know. I truly didn't know. Grace replied gently, That's right, you didn't know. But before you burned it, you never even asked. That single sentence made Margaret lower her head, her shoulders trembling uncontrollably. Michael slowly stood up. He bowed his head deeply before Grace, lower than he ever had in his life. Grace, I have no excuse left. I used to think I was a good husband simply because I never hit my wife and never betrayed her. But today, I finally understand. A real husband knows how to protect his wife when she needs him the most. That day, the person who hurt you the most wasn't Mother. It was me. I'm sorry. Grace gently closed her eyes. 6 years ago, she had waited for those words of apology until she nearly lost all hope. But today, when she finally heard them, her heart was strangely at peace. Some apologies come too late. Not because they aren't sincere, but because the person who needed healing had already learned how to heal herself a long time ago. Grace smiled softly. You don't owe me an apology. You only owe yourself the life you could have lived differently. Michael stood frozen. He knew Grace was right. The person who had lost the most was not only Grace. It was also himself, the man who had lost his family because of his silence. Grace walked over and opened the living room door. The evening sunlight poured into the room after the rain, carrying a gentle, cool breeze. She spoke politely. I wish you both the strength to get through this difficult time, but that road is one you must walk with your own feet. Margaret slowly stood up. She looked at Grace for a long time before bowing her head one last time. There were no more pleas, no more attempts to hold on. She understood that this was the price she had to pay. The mother and son quietly left the house. Neither of them looked back. Grace stood on the porch, watching their car gradually disappear behind the trees, then quietly let out a long breath. Not because she felt relieved for refusing them, but because she had finally closed the most painful chapter of her life. The next morning, Grace woke up just as she always did. She watered the flowers in the front yard herself, made a cup of coffee, and went to work. Her employees smiled and greeted her. Her business partners were waiting in the meeting room. The laughter, the greetings, and the peaceful rhythm of life continued as though nothing had ever happened. Because the greatest happiness is not watching the people who once hurt you pay the price. It is being able, after everything, to live a peaceful life without being imprisoned by the past. Some fires burn nothing more than a few sets of clothes, but other fires burn away a person's trust. Once trust has turned to ashes, all that remains is regret and consequences that no one can escape. If you were Grace, would you forgive that family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so I can continue bringing you more meaningful stories in future videos.